Hi all, this is Anthony with Adventures with Anthony, here with another travel tip to make your next adventure awesome. For today's travel tip, we're looking back at Google Flights. This time, learning how to search multiple airports to make sure you get the best deal wherever your adventures may take you. So last time, we looked at the calendar so that we could find what dates had the best prices for a specific destination leaving from a specific airport. But sometimes that's just not how vacations work. As an example, coming up this February, my husband and I are going on a cruise. And that has some set dates. The cruise itself is from February 5th until February 16th, leaving out of Fort Lauderdale. So I don't really want to use the calendar and take a look at this and say, well, maybe I can fly out a week earlier because I'm going to be spending a week in a hotel before I reach my cruise, have to take an extra week off of vacation for work, and that's just not going to be really realistic. So instead, what I want to do is I am flexible and I want to get the best deal. I can't be flexible with my dates, so instead I'm going to be flexible with my airports. This is another great tool that Google Flights lets you use. You might be familiar with most online flight search engines allowing you to specify nearby airports, and it might pull in a few airports within 50 or 100 miles of your location. Or maybe something if you're in a large city that has multiple airports. For example, if you're in Chicago, you might say all Chicago airports and let it search for both O'Hare and Midway. Or maybe if you're around New York, you can search for all area airports and search for JFK, LaGuardia, and Newark. But what if you're not in one of those big cities, or if you're willing to make a little bit of a further drive? That's where the tools at Google Flights really come in handy. So for example, we live in Elko, Nevada, which does have an airport, but it's got really limited flights. And as I can see, the most basic, cheapest flight is going to be $783 for the dates I want to fly. However, I don't mind doing a little bit of driving. So sure, we can stay here in Elko, which is airport code EKO. And you'll notice the first time that I search for an airport, there is a drop down to help you find the airport code. Then you can place a comma and start listing other airports. Now it is important to note that as you list more airports, the autocomplete will no longer work. So past the first airport, you need to know the airport code for all the airports that you're considering. For example, I know I'd be willing to make the 3-hour drive to Salt Lake City, which is SLC. I'd also be willing to go to Reno, Las Vegas, and let's say Boise, Idaho. And as far as the destination is concerned, I'd be willing to go to Fort Lauderdale. I'm also going to consider Miami. And let's go ahead and say Orlando, which is MCO. Now, once you've selected all the airports that you're willing to consider, you can just hit enter. And now all of a sudden I can see much cheaper flights. For example, I've got a non-stop flight from Las Vegas to Orlando for only $258 on Frontier. If I don't want to go with a budget airline, the cheapest one I've got has one stop in Dallas-Fort Worth from Las Vegas to Miami on American Airlines for only $321. So with this, it's a great tool to be able to sit there and look through and say, how far am I willing to drive? And once that's determined, what's the best deal that I can possibly get? Now, it is also important to note that there are additional fees that you have to keep in mind. If you're staying at a local airport, for example, you could probably take a taxi, an Uber, or a Lyft and save money on parking and gas. Whereas, let's say if we were to fly out of Las Vegas going to Miami on this flight here, or even let's go with the absolute cheapest flight on Frontier, nonstop Las Vegas to Orlando. That's going to involve 6 hours of drive time, including gas and possibly a meal along the way down to Las Vegas. It's going to involve approximately 2 weeks of long-term parking at the Las Vegas airport. And once we get to Orlando, we're going to have to pay for either a shuttle or rent a car to get to Fort Lauderdale. So I'm saving about $500 per person on the plane ticket. But then I do have to add in those extra fees. And that's where you're going to need to take a little bit of research or turn to somebody else who's going to be able to do that research quickly for you and present you a total cost of what you're looking for. For example, if you're saving $500 on the flights, but you're going to be spending $300 in parking and $300 on a rental car, it might not actually be a better deal. One other tool that's really useful when you're considering multiple airports is the map tool. If you scroll back up to the top of the page, you'll see a little map next to the inputs for the destination and arrival airports, as well as the departure and return dates. If you just click on that map, it's going to take you to a map. Basically just pull up Google Maps, showing all the different airports that are available, and showing you where you're leaving from and where you are going to. Now you can zoom in and just keep scrolling until you can see the airports that you've selected. And so for example here you can see where Orlando versus Fort Lauderdale and Miami is. So that gives you a general idea of the distance you're looking at. You'll also notice that it's going to populate with prices. So for example, I can at a quick glance see that for my dates and departure airports, there's a flight from Tampa for $238, which is even cheaper than the cheapest flight from Orlando. I can also see that there's a few airports such as Melbourne and West Palm Beach that, because they're smaller, don't automatically populate with prices. However, at any point you can click on them. Let's say if I really wanted to know what it was to fly into West Palm Beach, I can click on that and it's going to slowly go through and pull up the prices. Be careful when you scroll, as it will zoom in and zoom out. And now it's having a little bit of a slow time, but I can see that there's a United flight for $394 that goes to West Palm Beach. So between knowing what airports you're willing to fly into and then using the built-in map tool to find other airports that you might not have originally thought of, it's really quick and easy using Google Flights to find the absolute best deal on flights if you're willing to be a little bit flexible with your dates by using the calendar, or with your departure and or arrival airports by using a comma-separated list or the map. This has been an Adventures with Anthony travel tip, and I hope that you find the information useful when you're planning your next adventure. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment with any additional questions you might have, and we'll cover them in a future travel tip. You can also go to our website at adventureswithanthony.com, read reviews of some of the adventures that we have taken over the past few years, and start planning your next adventure. Thank you. Until next time, I'm Anthony. Have an adventure.